to the What Really Happened radio show. Because World War III is a really bad idea. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Thursday, July 16th, 2015. Sure happy it's Thursday. Sure happy it's Thursday. Sure happy it's Thursday. Today, of course, is the anniversary of the launch of Apollo 11 back in 1969. And obviously, great moment in history. And the 20th was the anniversary of the landing. And also Viking 1, we'll be talking about that as we get a little bit later on. We have lots to talk about. A lot of stuff going on. What looks like another staged, phony terror attack again down in Chattanooga. And obviously the aftermath of last night's vote on the Greek bailout plan, which is not getting a lot of coverage in the American media. The aftermath of the Iran deal, which is also likewise not getting a lot of coverage in the American media. They're all obsessing about this latest manufactured false flag terror attack. But we're going to be talking about that a little bit later on in the program. Our phone lines are open, 877-300-7645, 877-300-7645. Tom is sitting in our control room. I think it's Tom. It's either Tom or Don. And he'll be ready to answer the phone when you call on in. Now, yesterday, just as our show... and by the way, quick little program note. In our second hour today, Joshua Cook will be our on-air guest talking about these trade agreements. As you can tell, it's very, very busy today, and we're just scattered all over the place. Now, last night, just as we were getting ready to end the program, the Greek Parliament finally held their vote and passed the bailout agreement, and it won by a very large margin, supported by all the pro-banker opposition groups, unfortunately, Tsipras was able to convince a lot of his own Syriza party to betray their campaign promises and vote for this thing. But it sailed through with a very wide margin. And, of course, the reaction from the people of Greece was rather dramatic. There has been more protests. At the moment, they are peaceful. I was just looking at the Russia Today's live video feed, but the crowd has been growing all day long, and as we get into nighttime, not sure what is going to happen. They're throwing Molotov cocktails. They're attacking the police. They're trying to attack the banks. The people of Greece are angry, and they have every right to be. Tsipras has reminded the people of Greece and the people of planet Earth that you should never, ever, 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 ever believe anything a politician says when they're running for office. Tsipras has handed that proof down one more time. They'll say whatever it takes to get elected, then they will sell you out to the money junkies. That's modern life. So the violence is continuing over there in Athens, Greece. Maybe it'll die down. Maybe it'll escalate. But it reminds me very much of that old saying by John F. Kennedy, those who make peaceful revolution impossible make violent revolution inevitable. Greece could become a flashpoint for a global revolution against all the money junkies, because that was not what the people of Greece wanted. They're feeling very angry and betrayed. Now, we're continuing to see the aftermath of the P5+1 deal. Benjamin Netanyahu is just out there frothing at the mouth, and he's out there accusing everybody who agreed to it of betrayal. You were not thinking about Israel, which, of course, it's not their job to think about Israel. It's their job to think about their own country. And Netanyahu seems to have this attitude that every country on earth ought to place the interests of Israel ahead of their own. And because he got away with it here in the United States of America, he just assumes everybody else should think the same. And Netanyahu is out there screaming that this deal is posing a threat to the world because Iran is going to take all the money they're starting to get with the lifting of sanctions, and they'll put it into terror and weapons and war, and they'll starve their own people, and they're going to get ready to attack, which, again, history is against Netanyahu on this. Iran has not launched a war of aggression against another country in over 200 years. And for all the screaming and whining about Iran's nuclear weapons, remember, Israel and their whores in the U.S. Congress and the U.S. media have been saying Iran is just 6 months away from a nuclear weapon since the 1980s. and it hasn't happened yet. And these are all the exact same people who told you that Saddam Hussein had nuclear weapons. They're unashamed, unrepentant liars. And they're getting upset that you won't believe the lies any longer. They think you should. If you're a loyal Israeli or a loyal American, you will believe the bovine excrement or the terrorists will win. We're going to grab ourselves a quick little phone call here. Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Mike. Am I coming in clear? Because I'm getting a garbled connection, and I called in twice.
Okay, well, I don't know. Maybe Jade Helm is out there tapping the lines with really old, lowest bidder, rusty alligator clips or something.
I just want to say, yeah, with the Greece, yeah, man, it's unbelievable. It's like they're sellouts. You know, they're just sellouts, and I don't understand how anybody can think, putting more debt on debt is the right thing to do. It's just insane.
It isn't. They're just trying to kick the can down the road a little bit further until it's somebody else who goes down in the history book for letting it finally collapse. And all of these countries and all these private central banks are playing the same game because they all know it has to end badly at some point. They just want it to happen on somebody else's term in office or somebody else in the executive suite. They just want to keep things looking good until they can retire and go off and just say, wow, I got out of that one here, and we're going to let the next guy take the fall for it. But it has to end, and it's getting dangerously close. That is unavoidable. This betrayal by the Greek parliament against the Greek people, I mean, they're out there saying, oh, the Nazis are back here in Greece, all over again. It still may be a non-starter because the IMF doesn't want to throw any money to the bailouts. Great Britain is saying they're not going to send any money. Everybody who's looked at this is saying the deal can't work. They were all smoking opium over there when they put this thing together, just trying to make it look good and then saying basically, this is the deal and here we go. And by the way, somebody already put up an ad on Craigslist. Greece for sale, the Acropolis so many million euros, and the Parthenon so many million euros, and all this other stuff, and it's all in humor, but that's basically what's going on. They're privatizing Greece.
Am I on Iran? Yeah, I want everybody to look at how many countries Iran invaded in 200 years, and then go and look at how many countries the U.S. invaded in 200 years, and the U.S. is like a mile long.
Well, forget about the last 200 years. Look at how many countries the U.S. has invaded, or for that matter, Israel, just over the last decade. That'll tell you what's really going on here.
All right, thanks, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go and take Toby in New Hampshire. Aloha, Toby. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello there. Mike, can you hear me?
Yes, I can, and I guess you're calling from the Old Hampshire.
I'm calling from the Old Hampshire indeed. The New Forest, but it's the Old Hampshire.
Okay.
Listen, I'd like to talk to you about the BBC and the Iran deal and their part in it. As we know, the BBC have an internationally respected reputation for being balanced, impartial and unbiased. Well, the other day when the nuclear deal was announced with Iran, the BBC on the World at One reported it, and they gave time to the American point of view and also the Iranian point of view. What I'd like to point out is they also gave time to the Israeli point of view, both Netanyahu and one of his ministers, and the time they gave to them exceeded the combined time of the American and the Iranian point of view.
Imagine my shock. I'm shocked.
Wow.
Just shocked.
Wow. Well, carrying on with this theme,
Okay, Toby, I hate to cut you off. We're going to take a 4-minute break for commercials. Do not hang up. I'm going to come back to you after these words from our sponsors. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. Before we go back to the phone call, the American corporate TV news networks, all they're talking about is this shooting in Chattanooga. This stinks to high heaven of yet another manufactured phony terror attack to try and reignite the war fever. More about that a little bit later in the show. We're going to go back here to Toby in Hampshire, and please continue what you were saying.
Hi, Mike. Listen, I'm not Tobias or Toby. I'm Anthony or Tony. But anyway, that's immaterial. Listen, I'd like to talk to you about how and why what the BBC reports and give you Americans a take on maybe why there's a suspected compromise on what they say. For example, a question for you all. If at the time of the Israeli genocide in Gaza a year ago, if the BBC's reporter on the affairs had been named Ahmed Aziz, and the man reporting on the financial affairs had been called Mustafa Maliki, and the man responsible for deciding content of programs was named Ali Husseini, and the man responsible for the whole outfit was named Mohammed Tariqi, would you suspect that there might be a bias in this? Well, I suspect maybe yes. Let me tell you, a year ago, the man impartially reporting on the Middle Eastern affairs was Joshua Rosenberg.
Yes.
The man reporting on financial affairs, that is, Goldman Sachs, Lehman Brothers, all of that was John T. Bloom. The man responsible for content of programs was Alan Yentop, and overseeing it all was Barry Cohen. Well, now, call me suspicious, but I suspect that there might be a slight political or ethnic or religious bias in this.
Really?
Well, just a suspicion. Well, taking this thread a little bit further, bearing in mind that in the UK, 0.5% of the population, that's one person in 200, is of Jewish origin, maybe the investigation which is ongoing now into the paedophilia case in the UK, which involves high-ranking political members, establishment, police, and as far as the royal family, rather like your Franklin affair of 10 or 12 years ago. We've got an ongoing one here which started around Jimmy Savile, not Seville as you like to say, but here he's Jimmy Savile. But anyway, of that investigation, the Home Secretary of England put in charge of it, was obliged to put in charge of it somebody who was suitably qualified to deal with this investigation. Her first choice was a High Court judge. Well, I don't know how many High Court judges there are in the UK, I must say. I don't know how many of them are Jewish, and I don't know how many of them are female. But her first choice was Mrs. Butler-Slosh, who, by her name, we can see, happened to be Jewish. She also her husband happened to be a close friend of one of the people involved in the case, Lord Janner, who, of course,
yes,
is of the same persuasion. And when it was found out that he had personal connections with one of the accused, she was obliged to stand down. Our Home Secretary, in her infinite wisdom, was obliged to choose a second person to head this inquiry. She chose Mrs. Wolfe.
Mm-hmm.
Coincidentally, she was female. Coincidentally, she was a member of the same group. And coincidentally, her husband was also involved in... he wasn't involved. He was personally known to one of the accused. Well, now this is an odd coincidence. Now, either Mrs. May and her department are completely incompetent at being able to choose somebody, or maybe they've chosen somebody who would suit very well the result that they wanted for the outcome.
Well, let me cut in here. Let me cut in here just a little bit, because something you need to keep in mind when you have politicians who are committing these kinds of vile acts, they're wide open to blackmail. And Israel has a long record of using blackmail to coerce the cooperation of governments in other countries. And by controlling the exposure of the scandal, Obviously, Israel is in a great position to say, look, if you will agree to help us do this with Palestine, we will make sure that all of this other stuff goes away. And that really is, I think, a large part of what's going on here. What I still don't understand is why so many people in positions of power lay themselves open to blackmail by behaving in this manner, not just in Great Britain, but in the United States and all over. It just doesn't really make a lot of sense to me that if you are in a position of public trust, why you're going to engage in that kind of behavior, knowing that it rolls out the red carpet for foreign intriguers to come on in and basically co-opt you and hijack you.
Yeah, I don't know either, Mike. I think it must be just some kind of a human weakness that we have. It's interesting, it's always the males that get involved in this, and I think it might be an exploitation of males.
I wouldn't say that, and I know from something that I witnessed myself many years ago in Hollywood, there's a lot of women who like to go after the young boys, but it's just not reported on because, well, first of all, the boys aren't going to complain. Let's be very honest about that. And there is a bias to focus on the male perpetrators in these situations.
Oh yeah, men are being victimized by the female equality group as being. We are baddies.
Okay. All right. Well, listen, I'm going to let you go here because we're almost at the end of the segment. Okay, and I'm getting some feedback from your machine anyway. Thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go. We're going to start here with Matthew in Maryland. Thank you for waiting, but we may have to take you through another commercial break. What's on your mind?
Oh, that's fine. I was recently made aware of two separate programs in Maryland that are being cut apparently pretty harshly. One would be the medical assistance program, where apparently there's a pretty high percentage, and I don't want to put a pin an exact number on it, but a lot of people have lost their health care. And then on top of that, the funding has been cut to a lot of mental health institutions in Maryland that were operating under the.
Well, that latter one's been going on for a long, long time here. But I'll bet you those illegal immigrants are still getting their free medical care. Anyway, listen, we got to take a break for commercials. Matthew, is there anything else, or can I let you go?
Just one more thing.
All right, I'm going to put you on hold. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, and we're going to go right back to the phones here to Matthew in Maryland. You're talking about cuts to social programs. Now, cuts for mental health facilities have been going on for a very, very long time. Facilities are closed. The people are just dumped out on the street. They form a big part of the homeless population. They get into confrontations with the police and get shot and killed. That's the low-cost option, apparently, according to the government view. This idea that they're cutting health care, well, again, they want to collect all the taxes they can and give you nothing back. So you have to pay for your health care, and you have to pay for your mental health care, and you have to pay for everything yourself with what little few coins you're allowed to keep in your pocket, and then they wonder why the economy is locking up.
Well, I just think it speaks to, it does speak to the economy, especially considering that, Maryland's proximity to D.C., if they're cutting programs like that in this state, considering how much D.C. money flows around in this area, it definitely speaks to the economy and how things are kind of coming down the drain. But one thing I wanted to say was, and this is kind of off topic, all the racism stuff that I've been, hearing and, that goes over the mainstream garbage media and the Confederate flag issue and whatnot. I decided I was going to do something about it, and what I've been doing, and I'd like to encourage other people to do it, is now I'm white, or actually I'm kind of a peach color, not really white, but I just talk to people about it. And I intentionally talk to, people of all colors, whether they're white or whether they're black or whatever. And honestly, Monday through, this whole week I've done it, at least to 2 or 3 people a day. And normally when I talk to people about social issues, I get kind of depressed because I don't always, hear people that, are awake. But quite frankly, all this week I've had really, really positive responses from people in the sense that they get the idea that the media is trying to push us in that direction. And I just encourage people that are listening to the show just to reach out to a stranger or someone that they meet or someone that they talk to that they think might be receptive and just try to say, hey, we put our pants on the same way. The only difference between us is really the color of our skin. We all try to raise our children. We all try to, have a good life. And I think it's the only way we're really going to get around this.
Well, it's one way, but the other way is to go on out and confront the cause of all of this upset head on. This is a repeat of the COINTELPRO tactic from the 1960s of turning the black and white people against each other, so we're screaming at each other and not paying attention to what the government is doing. And just tell anybody, go on out and research COINTELPRO, research the Black Panther coloring book. That was an FBI hoax that was put out there to get the white people and the black people angry with each other. It's classic divide and conquer. Same thing with the feminist movement. Get the men and the women arguing with each other. Get the blacks and the whites arguing with each other. Get the Hispanics and the Chinese and everybody arguing with each other, so we cannot unite as a single American people and look at what's really the cause of all of our suffering, which is that private central banking system and the complicit government.
Absolutely. I just think that anything that we can all do will make a difference.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Okay, well, thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to move right along. And by the way, just a little footnote, I've never actually met anybody who was pure white or pure black. To me, they're all varying shades of gold, and that might be an image to hold in your mind. Now, getting on back to Israel and Iran, Netanyahu is out there screaming at every leader of the P5+1, saying that you failed completely. You failed completely. You did not do what we wanted you to do. And finally, basically, the British Foreign Secretary came right out and said to Netanyahu, there isn't anything we could have agreed to in Tehran that you would have liked. Okay, so if there's no way to make you happy, we're going to quit trying is basically the message. And it's about time we did. There is nothing anybody can do that is ever going to please Israel and make them happy and satisfied. They're always going to want more. There's going to be another demand. Why even bother starting down that path in the first place? Now, the reality is, and this is over in Veterans News Now, the world opinion has turned against Israel and Netanyahu. They're realizing that Israel is causing all this ruckus. They are blocking the possibility of any kind of peace. They're staging all these false flag attacks all over the place. They want war and conflict because it brings them wealth and power. And enough is enough is enough. So, meanwhile, here in the United States of America, Sheldon Adelson, very wealthy casino owner out in Nevada, is backing a lot of candidates in the GOP. And, of course, is now directing all of the GOP politicians who are getting his checks that they have to derail the Iran deal. They're not even trying to hide the fact that Israel is buying the Congress to kill the Iran deal. That's what's going on here. AIPAC isn't hiding the fact they're up there on Capitol Hill screaming that anybody who doesn't work to block this Iran deal will not be getting their support for next year's elections. That's it. It's extortion. You want to keep your job, you will do what we tell you to do. Forget the will of the American people. They don't count anymore. Only we count. Only Israel counts. Only AIPAC counts. Article over in Desert Peace is out there saying it's basically down to AIPAC versus the entire world. Because the rest of the world wants this deal, Iran wants the deal, Obama wants the deal, the American people want the deal, 90% of the respondents to a poll on our website want the deal. It is Israel and AIPAC that are out there saying, we will decide what the world will do regarding Iran. Your opinion doesn't matter. Only our opinion matters. Now, Kim.com, who was the founder of Mega Upload, has weighed in on the debate saying that if I was Iran, I would go ahead and build nuclear weapons. Because it's very obvious the U.S. and Israel want to invade and smash up the place the way they did with Iraq. And I'm in agreement. Iran should have the bomb as a deterrent. Remember, that was the reason my parents' generation were convinced to fork over $5 trillion. And that back then, that was a lot of money. For America's nuclear deterrent, not because we were going to attack any other countries with nuclear weapons, even though we're the only nation that's actually done that, but we had to deter the rest of the world as they got nuclear weapons. Well, if deterrence works for the U.S., it's got to work for Iran. And if deterrence doesn't work, then we all got cheated out of all that money for America's nuclear deterrent, and we deserve a refund. I mean, the U.S. is out there saying all these little countries being invaded represent a threat. How are they a threat to the United States of America if we are a nuclear power? Nobody can attack us. The stories keep changing. They do. Now, interesting development over in Israel itself. Netanyahu is apparently having talks with his main opposition party, the Zionist Union, and its leader Herzog, about possibly forming a new unity government. Now, whether that means Netanyahu feels his own majority is eroding, or he wants a stronger Israeli government for a coming attack on Iran, I'm not sure, but it is a significant development. All right, let's see. We're going to grab a quick phone call. David in Austin, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
He's just listening right now.
Sorry. Oh, he's just listening. Oh, well, he just hung up. My goodness. I didn't mean to scare him away. Now then, apparently an Israeli surveillance drone crashed in the port of Tripoli earlier today, up in North Lebanon. And the Lebanese government is very angry about that. Israel's been saying they have to send surveillance drones to keep an eye on Hezbollah. There's only one problem. Hezbollah is all in the south part of Lebanon. They're not near Tripoli. There's nothing but Sunni Muslims up there. And so the government of Lebanon is saying, why are you up here spying on us, invading our airspace? The good news is they got the Israeli drone virtually intact. It may have run out of fuel or whatever, but it crashed into the water and they recovered it virtually intact, and probably, like Iran, they're going to reverse engineer it, come out with their own. We got to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And because we do have a guest in our second hour, I'm going to skip on down my normal order of talking points here. I want to deal with this Chattanooga situation. This thing reeks of another staged false flag attack. And it started this morning where somebody fired shots into a military reservation area. There were two different shooting locations. 4 Marines have been killed. 1 additional Marine has been wounded. A police officer has been wounded. And the gunman is dead, so we can't hear their side of the story. The gunman is being identified as, and you knew this was coming, Muhammad Yusuf Abdulaziz. But they're even admitting this could be an alias, could be a fake name. We're not sure. And here's where it gets really, really interesting. Because just at the moment the shooting started, somebody who had a Twitter account saying, I'm ISIS, believe me, came out and said Chattanooga. And this was blasted all over the web by Pamela Geller, which tells you this is all orchestrated, bought, and paid for. If you hear Rita Katz, Site Intelligence, or Pamela Geller attached to anything coming over the media, you know it is not worth paying attention to. By the way, in all the videos they're showing of the shooting scenes, you see all those no firearms signs on the door? Isn't it wonderful how well those signs and no gun zones actually work? So they're out there trying to fan up all this hate against ISIS and get the war fever going so that you're going to be cool when Israel goes in and slaughters the Iranians. And by the way, somebody fired another bottle rocket into a totally empty lot inside Israel, and Israel is bombing Gaza again. That's not being reported either on the American media. They're totally obsessed with Chattanooga. They haven't done anything else. Bill Cosby's got to be breathing a sigh of relief. He's fallen off the news agenda here. And, of course, the gun grabbers are out there saying, oh, this guy had numerous weapons. He had lots of weapons. We've got to have a gun ban, blah, 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 blah. Now, remember what they said about the Charleston shooting. The guy shouldn't have been able to legally buy a gun, but somehow he got one. And the reality is there's been yet another one of these studies coming out showing that as gun permits increase in a neighborhood, the murder rate actually drops. It's completely refuting this idea that guns lead to more violence. The only violence is this stuff being done, staged false flag terror attacks using patsies who are juiced out of their mind on antidepressants. Next, they're going to bring up Al Gore to say that guns cause global warming and we should ban them because of that. It's ridiculous. We had a caller. He just hung up here. Final reminder, you are 58 times more likely to be killed by a police officer than by a terrorist in this country. All right. So I got Chattanooga out of the way. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, until somebody can prove otherwise, this is another one of these let's hate the Muslims and hate ISIS staged false flag attacks. It's got all the hallmarks. I mean, look how quick everybody got on board. The FBI is there, the Department of Homeland Security is there. Oh, yes, we've got Mohammed. He's an ISIS terrorist. All righty. Now then, the NSA, actually some leaked NSA documents, have confirmed that Israeli special forces were behind the assassination of Brigadier General Mahmoud Suleiman, who was killed on a beach near the northern Syrian port of Tartus in August of 2008. Now, The Guardian reported at the time that the murder was perpetrated by a sniper firing from a yacht moored offshore. Israel denied it. Apparently, as usual, once they deny it, you can start assuming that it's absolutely what happened here. The government of South Africa has gone on the warpath regarding these Israeli organizations who are providing free propaganda trips to Israel for up-and-coming young leaders of the government. And the Deputy Minister of Traditional Affairs, Obed Bapala, is condemning the South Africa-Israel Forum for what he says they're trying to brainwash the future leadership of the country in order to reverse the African National Congress stand on occupied Palestine. Story coming out of Investment Watch blog, the U.S. government is ready to push the agenda to get Assad out of Syria. We've wasted 4 years on this. It's time to just let's just drone strike him and get him over with. Now, everybody's talking about the situation in Yemen. How could ISIS have gotten so completely out of control? Well, they didn't. This is not a war against ISIS in Yemen. It's a collective punishment of the Yemenite people for kicking out their U.S. puppet ruler. And supporting this idea that this isn't really ISIS is the fact that the United States government purchased a bunch of anti-terrorism supplies and equipment for Yemen to use against Islamist extremists, and it's been sitting inside a Virginia warehouse for the last 8 years. They took your money, they bought all the stuff, said we're sending it to Yemen to help against the Islamic jihadists, and then it sits in a Virginia warehouse. All right, we're going to grab ourselves a phone call here. Jason in Ohio. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, I'm just wanting to tell you that I'm having internet difficulties. I don't know why I'm having this. I had them come out and fix stuff, and I'm still having this.
Who's your provider?
Windstream.
Okay, not familiar with them. Who knows what's going on? There's a lot of people misusing the internet, most of them from the National Security Agency. And I know that out here, Time Warner is trying to speed up the local net to 300 megabits per second, which is great, except that it's dropping out constantly. For applications that have buffering, we're able to survive, but for things like Telnet into my server, it keeps dropping the connection, and that's very, very annoying.
It is. It's very annoying, and that's what I'm going through right now. I mean, you're coming through choppy and stuff, and I can understand everything. It's like, well,
are you listening to me on GCN or on BAM User?
GCN.
GCN is choppy. Okay, well, I'm sorry for that. I know that BAM.
Well, no, it's not choppy on GCN. It's choppy on the phone. That's the difference.
Now that's interesting because your phone connection to me is very clear.
Oh,
so,
okay.
But
we're coming back. It's chopping.
We're basically living in a country where everybody's so busy selling next year's gizmo that they don't want to fix or repair or keep the current equipment running. I mean, it's a classic symptom of fascism. Where everything looks really good, but it doesn't work very well. And we're seeing that. Anyway, listen, I need to let you go here, first of all, because you can't hear me, and second of all, because we're coming up at the top of the hour, and I want to get a few more stories here before we get our guest, Joshua Cook, on the air. So, Jason, thank you very much for the phone call. Now, the U.S. government is continuing to claim that Ukraine shot down Malaysian Airlines Flight 17. As you know, there was this so-called international investigation that was put together, and there's been a lot of political pressure put on them, but to date, the Dutch investigators say they cannot confirm Ukraine had anything to do with this. And I still am not ready to rule out the possibility that Kiev sent up a fighter plane to shoot down Vladimir Putin's presidential jet, which was painted very much like Malaysian Airlines Flight 17, and he got the wrong plane. I have a lot of people emailing me saying, oh, that's ridiculous, that's nonsense, but we do have that statement that the pilot of that fighter airplane, when he landed again, was talking about he'd gotten the wrong target. So if he wasn't aiming for Putin and he got Flight 17, who was he trying to shoot down that looked like a Malaysian Airlines passenger jet? So it's still up there. But we know, we live in an age of lies. Truth is always the first casualty of war. And we're in a war government, a war White House, a war president, and we're in a war economy. They don't want to admit it, but that's where we are. And the first tool of statecraft to get a population ready to go to war are lies, frauds, and deceptions, including, in my opinion, this incident down in Chattanooga. Now, the White House has now cut the expected gross domestic product for the United States government for this year by 1/3. They're still out there saying, oh, the economy's great, everything's booming, and so on, and yet even the rigged, artificial, phony propaganda numbers are having to be cut back here. Now, down in Puerto Rico, they have missed a $94 million payment on a bond issue. The Federal Reserve has already said there's going to be no bailouts. What's going to happen when those credit default swaps kick in? We got to take a break for our news broadcast. We're going to be back here with Joshua Cook and the trade partnerships after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 877-300-7645. And the corporate news media is still totally obsessing about this shooting in Chattanooga. This is not news reporting. This is a sales campaign. Okay, they just, with their Muhammad, ISIS, you should hate all the Arab Muslims because we're about to start yet another war over there in the Mideast with somebody over there. All right, so joining us on the phone right now is Joshua Cook, and Joshua is a fellow radio host. He runs a website, and he's here to basically talk about these trade agreements, which we are just hearing all these horrible things about them. So, Joshua, thank you for spending time with us today.
Well, Michael, thank you so much for having me on the show. I do appreciate it.
Well, obviously, we've been hearing a lot about the Trans-Pacific Partnership, the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership. There seem to be some other treaties being negotiated as well. They're being handled in secret. Even members of Congress are having to sign a non-disclosure agreement to look at these things. Very obviously, something that is being kept that tightly under wraps is not in the interests of the American people. We know that the U.S. government has gone as far as to drop its opposition to slavery and human rights abuses in some of these other countries in a desperate bid to get them to sign on. What do you think is behind all of these treaties? What's going on?
Well, I mean, and the bottom line is this. There's a total mainstream media blackout about the TPP. I mean, thank God for you and me to try to get the word out, the information out, with the little that we know about it. And of course, the information that we know about is terrible. So, I mean, just my opinion is, and I've been writing about this on truthandmedia.com for 2 years now. I mean, this is basically a multinational corporation takeover of countries. I really believe it. This is about the 1%, getting rich off the backs of middle class families, people that work every day.
Rise of the corporate state. Seeing the rise of the corporate state over the nation state.
Absolutely. And, just my congressman, I'm in South Carolina, we've been calling him out. And, this is not a partisan issue. You have people that, for example, Elizabeth Warren wrote a great piece in the Washington Post. And she's warning people there's a clause in the TPP. It's called an investor state dispute settlement. Oh my gosh, this is a pretty scary clause. This is a multinational court that can override American laws. So if say that a company like Monsanto wants to sue because they're losing dollars because of a particular law, well, they can sue the taxpayers of the U.S. to compensate their loss. I mean, this is unbelievable. And so, in other words, we're handing over our sovereignty to these people that are going to rule in judgment. We have no way to appeal. And who are these corporate lobbyists? They're corporate lobbyists, and so you have, progressives, you have libertarians, you have conservatives. All of them should be against this because, it really takes the sovereignty. And I mean, we believe that we have a constitution. We believe we're a country of laws, and this is just insane to me and this is basically just crony capital. This is a crony capitalist dream.
It's a return to mercantilism, which was a very popular form of political economic collusion back in the 18th century. In fact, that was a big part of the oppression the American colonies were put under that led to the Revolution. The idea that there were corporations that were partners with the government, and you were forced to buy whatever you needed to buy from these. And I would argue with the claim that we're giving away our sovereignty. It's actually being stolen from us by our own government and sold to the highest bidder.
Yeah, and so there's been pressure. Even there's a piece that I did recently on truthandmedia.com, and in the last 11th hour, Ted Cruz switched his position on TPA, which is basically giving fast track authority to Obama. This is the troubling thing is people that I talk to that know about this issue are totally against it. But we had one congressman in our state say, "Well, I understand you want me to go against this, but I have too many corporations that finance my campaign." That's pretty much what he was saying.
Yeah.
But one thing that I think your listeners should know, something that's very, I'm all into buying locally. I believe in local organic farms. But this Buy America is basically going to be done away if this passes. For example,
we've already had that World Health Organization ruling that meat can no longer be identified for its country of origin. We know that TPP and TTIP have clauses in there absolutely prohibiting GMO labeling. They're taking away our right to know what it is we're buying and putting in our mouths. And we've seen
Yeah.
All right, go ahead.
No, that's very disturbing. Not only that, I spoke to a gentleman that runs a website. It's called ObamaTrade.com, Curtis Ellis, and he said basically the state of South Carolina, for example, wanted to only buy locally from local farmers. Well, according to this agreement, they can set up a tribunal to basically sue the state of South Carolina to prohibit that. I mean, this is really insane. This is not what Americans about. Look, the bottom line is we need to know what's in this treaty. We should have, the Washington should have the input of the American people, because the bottom line is we want a real free trade agreement, and this is not free trade. Exactly what you said. This is mercantilism. This is totally crony capitalist gone amok.
Well, there's another agenda behind that, and that is the reason Obama's pushing on this so hard is they're trying to lock the current status quo for the global economy before the rising ruble and yuan shifted away from America any further. One of the main reasons behind all of these wars we've seen over the last 13, 14 years is a desire to drag the world back to dependence on the dollar from the Bretton Woods Agreement, trading all natural resources only for the petrodollar, and that whole system is falling apart. More and more countries are doing direct currency exchanges without going through the dollar, and they're selling their natural resources for the currencies. That's what triggered the wars in Libya and Iraq, was that both those governments said, we're going to sell our oil for whatever currency the buyer wants to give to us. But the U.S. can't go on trying to conquer the entire world. And so all of these so-called free trade agreements are basically trading our sovereignty for the corporations in exchange for locking all these nations into the current financial system before it deteriorates and decays any further.
Yeah, that's totally correct. There's so much in this agreement. Another thing is free speech, and of course we do this all the time. We try to inform people. What scares me is that some of the intellectual properties, the ability to shut your website down, because of some type of, infringement. Of course, we know politicians can just basically, create a circumstance where they can do that. I mean, this is, free speech is so important to us. It's so important to the, guys like you and me, journalists that really try to inform the public. This is definitely a thing. I would just encourage everybody to, inform your friends and family about this issue. Have them call you Congress. We need to put more pressure on Washington if we really want to keep our freedoms in the U.S.
We really do need, and we need to stand up here right now. But unfortunately, I think we're in the same situation the people of Greece are. Okay? We've been told a lot of promises by these politicians to run for office, and as soon as they're in office, like your local politician said, they're for sale to the highest bidder, the corporations, the government of Israel, AIPAC, and they're just not interested in listening to us. They just want us to go on believing the promises for next year's election season, and they don't have any intention to deliver on them any more than Cyprus did. And that's unfortunately the reality where we are right now. We've got to take a break for 4 minutes for commercials, and we'll be back with Joshua Cook after these words from our sponsors. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're talking with Joshua Cook. And Joshua, I know how frustrating it is. We're seeing all of these secret negotiations. We're seeing how all these treaties are being kept hidden from the American people, who are going to be expected to abide by whatever the rules and regulations are that are in there, that are decided in the dark. And that certainly is not what the United States is supposed to be. Congress is supposed to represent the American people, not the American corporations. And very clearly, with the intense amount of secrecy that is surrounding these treaties, they're scared of what the American reaction is going to be to these things.
Yeah, I think it's interesting too, because we know the Republican Party is based on Merkelism, as you pointed out. Basically picking winners and losers and rubbing elbows with the rich and powerful. But what is happening to the Democrat Party? I mean, here you have a war. When they were trying to pass fast track authority, the TPA, you had a lot. You had Nancy Pelosi, you had Elizabeth Warren, and a lot of Democrats fight Obama, and that was really interesting. But what has happened to Obama? Here he is. He ran as a president who was going to change Washington. It would be more transparent. Very disappointing. The feedback that I'm getting from people that voted for Obama, that was hoping for something different, very disappointing. And I'm talking about from Democrats. Very disappointed that he is basically. How is he any different than any Republican? John Boehner. But there again, it's 2000, you were coming after the 2016 election. So I would encourage everybody, look, put pressure. If they don't listen, at least we can annoy them. Let's go to some of these town halls. Let's ask them about the TPP. Let's ask them. Let's put them on record. And I think we can do that. And, but it's interesting. What is Hillary Clinton? I mean, she is basically, it sounds like she's really for TPP as well. I think the only one that's probably, a little more in line with the platform of the Democrat Party would be Sanders, but who knows? Who knows where he really stands on the position? Yeah,
we can't know where any of them stand on any position. I mean, when you've lived as long as I have, and you have been studying the political system for as many years as I have, it becomes very obvious these are nothing but liars, sociopaths, money junkies, and they've hijacked what used to be the greatest nation on earth, and now they're basically strip mining it and putting the wealth in their own pocket.
Absolutely.
Okay, so before we let you go, where can people go online to hear your radio show and read your writings?
Well, Michael, I really, first of all, thank you so much for having me on your show. And if all your listeners could go to truthandmedia.com, and what we try to do there, of course, Ben Swan is an investigative journalist, award-winning journalist, and we really want to get past the left-right paradigm. We want to get really focus on the truth and kind of what you're doing. Just using common sense and make people aware that there's really not a two-party system. This is, we're just being controlled by, the 1%, and we really want to get beyond that and really inform people to the truth. And and really, as far as the media, bring the truth back and not, not confuse people that there's always this left-right paradigm. And so we really try to...
That's just to give us the illusion that we've got some kind of a choice here going in, but we really don't.
Exactly.
It really is the same group of people. All that really changes with our election is which pig's snout is deeper into the trough for the next few years here. And that
and I think and I heard your show, you were talking to it too, the media distracts. So, when they run stories, like you mentioned the Chattanooga story, you always need to ask yourself, okay, what else, what are they really trying to hide from the American people? So, I think your audience, I think they're awake, and that really gives me hope.
Well, again, looking at the corporate media, I've been going around the cable channels and all the news channels. Chattanooga is the only thing they're reporting. That's it. This is not news reporting. It is a sales campaign. It's a propaganda campaign. They're out there, Muhammad, ISIS, Muslim, bad, terror, and, they're pounding on it. And it almost appears like they're pounding it as hard as they are because they realize the American people just don't tend to buy into these things anymore. They're not getting traction. And it's rather amazing that, considering, the entire 9/11 hoax has collapsed, Boston has collapsed, we're finding all these, where the FBI has literally created at least 90% of the recent terror incidents by planting informants on patsies and talking them into doing things. And they always target these guys whose brains are partly melted by these prescription antidepressants. This could turn out to be exactly the same. I'm waiting to find out if this guy was on prescription antidepressants. And again, go back and study the history of COINTELPRO in the 1960s, and you'll understand this is exactly how the government has always operated. Lies, fraud, and deception to get what they want. This is just more of the same. And you're right, it is a distraction from other more important issues, like what's going on over in Athens, Greece, what's going on in the aftermath of the P5+1, and of course, these very, very obviously anti-American interest treaties. Because the people pushing for this global government, this global financial system, they understand all of the people of planet Earth, the 99%, have to be crushed down to the same standard of living before they can drop the borders. Otherwise, everybody's going to be running all over the place. And so that's literally what's going on. They're deliberately making us all poor in order that they can have a single giant planetary human ranch.
Yes. Absolutely right. Oh, and by the way, never report on Gaza.
Yeah.
The fact that they haven't rebuilt, they're not getting the supplies to rebuild houses. It's really it's absolutely a travesty what's happening over there. A year, of course they were, attacked. It's 1 year anniversary now, and it looks the same. It's just absolute destruction.
It really does. Israel has this little game that they play where, any humanitarian aid that's being allowed into Gaza, they let it sit on the docks for like about 2 months, so that by the time the Gazans get it, it's all rotted. It's it's wet. It's basically useless. And that's just another one of these little games that Israel likes to play. All right, Josh, got to let you go. We're coming up here on a commercial break, and when we come on back, going to be finishing up with the economy, talking about, again, what's going on with Chattanooga, more about global warming, other frauds. The Confederate flag, they're still up in arms about that as well. It does feel like the entire country is just going absolutely crazy right now. It really, really does. By the way, for those of you following the WhatReallyHappened.com website, I was able to take a lot of what I learned trying to get Drupal 7 to work, which was a total crash and burn, but it's allowed me to go back into the current website and fix some of the things that were broken by the PHP upgrade, and so it looks like the current site may be coming back to life. Huzzah, huzzah, huzzah. We'll be right back after these words from our sponsors. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. Getting on back to the economy now that we're through talking with Joshua Cook and these very worrying trade agreements being negotiated in the dark corners of the bowels of power. You don't need to know what's in them. You'll have to obey them, but, secrecy is the beginning of tyranny. Good quote to remember right now. Now, everyone's always talking about the U.S. stock market and whether it's up or whether it's down. We've seen the plunge protection team that's out there trying to prop things up. They had a sort of kind of a good day on the market. It opened up high, went down, went back up again, ended a little in the green, not enough to pop the champagne corks just yet. But there's an aspect that people don't talk about, and that's the size of the stock market. Not its value, not the numbers, not the indicators. Okay? Back in 1998, there were 7,562 different issues of stock traded in the U.S. publicly. Okay? Today, there are 3,812. That means half of the companies being traded on the stock market have vanished between 1998 and today. And that is really going to tell you what's going on with the U.S. economy. Meanwhile, up in Wisconsin, Scott Walker, who has just declared for the presidency, has signed a bill to strip workers on government projects from wage protections. Wisconsin used to have a law that said that workers on state projects had to be paid the same as workers in the private sector. It was a prevailing wage law, and this new spending bill included a provision to basically end it. For those of you looking at Scott Walker as a potential presidential candidate, there's an indicator of where his sympathies lies, along with, of course, his fight against the teachers over the pension issue. Because we all know the reason the public workers' pensions all across the country are in trouble. The collapse of Wall Street's mortgage-backed security fraud in 2008, and Scott Walker, like every other governor who wants to go to the White House someday, as he just proved once again, he's not going to point the finger of blame where it richly deserves to go. Wall Street, oh, it's you teachers and you police and your firefighters, you demand too much. And you workers on state projects, yeah, we're going to bid you down here because we got to save some tax money here. All right, we're going to grab a phone call. Janet in South Florida, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind? What's on your mind? I'm doing too many things. I'm reading too many things, watching too many things, and
that's okay. Every man I speak to does the same thing to me, but that's all right. Two items. First, Elizabeth Warren. I called her Washington office and also her office here where I live in South Florida yesterday. I wanted to ask about the so-called cashless society where all the banks, HSBC, JP Morgan, Citibank, have all said that they don't want people using cash any longer. And I wanted to see if her office staff could get the word to her, because I want to know how she feels about it, or would she be willing to speak to the public about this, because I think it's very wrong. I'm outraged by it. I have been personally spoken to about it at the bank where I go. And even her staff in Washington, D.C. was totally unaware of it. I don't know if they were being truthful with me. I can't understand Senator Warren's staff not being aware of something that the so-called big banks are speaking out to the public about.
Well, but before you go on to your second item, I want to respond to that, because a lot of this talk about cashless society may have been no more than a trial balloon, which is a term of craft for public relations where if they're thinking about doing something, they'll make an announcement and then they'll get the public reaction to see if the public's going to go along with it. And obviously the reaction to a ban on all cash has been intensely negative, and they may just be thinking about dropping it. It all depends on how bad the economy gets, because the primary reason for a ban on all cash is to prevent runs on the bank. You go to the bank and say, give me my money, and they say, well, we can't. There's no such thing as cash. All we can do is transfer the money to another bank in the system where they can transfer it back to cover losses. There's about $1.3 trillion in cash in circulation in the pockets of the American people, and the banks want that on their balance sheets to meet their reserve requirements. And also, if you're having to do everything in your life on that little plastic card, the government knows what you're buying. Jelly donuts, adult magazines, and the rest of it. And it's really none of their business. Okay, that's what
and that's their to me that's their main reason, and that's control over the people.
Well, I'll tell you, if they ban cash, we can expect them to ban silver and gold investment coins at the same time, because what people will do is go on down to the coin dealers, and they'll take their plastic card and say, empty the bank account and give it to me in silver and gold, and I'm going to take that home. So they're going to have to ban silver and gold along with the cash, or it's simply not going to work.
You know, I keep remembering you saying you refer to these people as elites. I don't give them that much credit. To me, I only use the word financial terrorist, all of them. If their last name is Rothschild, financial terrorist. Last name, Rockefeller, financial terrorist. On and on.
I don't call them elites. I call them money junkies.
There's only enough of them to fill a bus, but there's 330 million of us. Come on. There's not enough of them to take over anything. I don't care how much money they have.
Well, the problem is they've got enough money to buy half the country to go out and shoot the other half of the country. That's how they maintain their control, is they can buy. There are going to be enough Americans. Look at all those people working for Blackwater Z or Academy or whatever they're calling themselves this week. There's always going to be a segment of the population who will be willing overseers over the slaves in exchange for a little extra beneficial treatment from massa.
Okay, if we lose our money, if we lose our paychecks, if we lose our pensions, if we lose our money in the bank, what will they have?
Oh, there'll be special arrangements to make sure that the overseers are still being cared for. I mean, that's just comes with the plan.
For all of the police officers, for all of the military, will they all have their money in place?
They could be issued military scrip. That's something that the Army always does when we have occupying forces in other countries. They issue military scrip, which is a currency that only the military is allowed to use. And they could do the same.
And then we'll all be dead, Mike.
Again, the issue is all they need is, and again, there are, look at all the collaborators in France when the Nazis took over there. There's always going to be a segment of the population who are going to want to side with the government and the money junkies because they think their own life is going to improve, and it will a little tiny bit. Not by much, but they get the ego boost. I'm working for the Führer. I'm working for the bankers. I'm an FBI undercover informant. I'm a spy. And then they go home and whack off to old James Bond movies and imagine that they actually matter in life.
Okay. I have to keep on going to target practice, I guess.
Yes, we all do. By the way, there's a cool show out there called Guntucky. It's on the Outdoor Channel. I didn't even know there was an Outdoor Channel. I just stumbled on it by accident. And it's this shooting enthusiast show, and it is a lot of fun. So if you've got the Outdoor Channel on your cable box, you want to look for it. The show is called Guntucky.
I'm going to have to check on it, but before I go, I want to speak about my second item, which has to do with Bernie Sanders yesterday on a site.
Okay, well, we're going to have to take we're going to have to take a 4-minute break for commercials. Do not hang up. We'll come back after the commercials, and you can talk all you want about Bernie Sanders. All right, so we will be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show, and we are going to go back to the phones with Janet in South Florida and tell us all about Bernie Sanders.
Thank you so much for coming back to me, Michael. This was something that I had caught on one of the sites. Don't ask me which site it was. I don't even remember. And it was yesterday. I was watching it, so I don't know if it actually took place yesterday or the day before yesterday. He was at a town hall meeting, as he usually has been lately. And he was talking about Israel in a very positive note and the Israeli people, and he was met with anger.
Yes.
And by many people in the audience, and it just became very vicious, whatever they said on behalf of the Palestinian people. His voice got louder, their voice got louder, his voice got even louder. He became, in my opinion, a very ugly man.
Yeah, we had heard that. We posted the video of that on whatreallyhappened.com a few days ago.
I came in late, so I didn't even know what was going on.
Well, no, and the situation here, I don't think Bernie Sanders' rise in the polls is because Bernie Sanders himself is all that attractive to people. It's just right now he's the only Democratic alternative to Hillary, and Hillary's popularity is plunging right now. Unfortunately, all of these candidates, they're all bought and paid for by Israel. So it's almost a null factor in looking at them. It's a reality that, if you have not pleased the imperial, capital over in Tel Aviv, that you're not going to be allowed to be a politician in the United States of America. And, of course, these days the American people are seeing it. And I think they're probably, like me, they're fed up and angered and humiliated that we are under foreign puppet rule. The people of Iraq didn't like it. The people of Yemen didn't like it. The people of Libya didn't like it. Why should we be any more comfortable with it than they are?
An informed American is aware of it. Many Americans are not even aware of it, I find, anyhow. If you say something to an American that is not aware, their eyes spin in their head. I've found that around here. Anyhow.
Yeah, but fewer and fewer of them as time goes on. I mean, the general trend is that Americans are becoming more aware. Audience for the corporate media is diminishing. That's why they're still going nonstop about this Chattanooga thing, and now the White House is in. We will work to find an answer. So it's already being sold to us as a terror attack, and they're going to try and milk this for the next few days, and we're off and running again. Another false flag. We got to bomb somebody, even if they didn't have anything to do with it. We're going to go out and bomb somebody to show how butch the United States of America is.
I find so many people agreeing with you on, the guy who's the guy that's a Republican that owns all the money and has no lobbyists. What's his name? You
mean Trump?
Yes.
Yes, okay. No, he's not going to win the White House. He's going to get the Ron Paul treatment, and if push comes to shove, they'll give him the Robert Kennedy treatment. But I love the fact that he's out there stirring up the pot and forcing all of these politicians to deal with what's really going on in this country and not just run off to the safety of their little manufactured fringe issues like gay marriage and abortion rights and racial tension and all the rest of it.
That's what I love about him. That's what I love about him.
He's leading the GOP polls right now.
Hillary Clinton. Anyhow, Michael, thank you so much for what you do.
Well, thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go here right now. Finishing up on the economy here, the depression here in the United States of America, of course, has actually slowed personal transportation. We've got 93 million Americans willing and able to work, can't find a job, so what do? They stay at home. They're using less gas. They're not wearing out their tires. And that means the Highway Trust Fund, which is where all these taxes are supposed to go into, is broke. It is out of money. So now the government is trying to increase fees charged by the Tourism Suppression Agency. I'm sorry, the TSA, that bunch of people. They're going to raise the fees there to fund road repairs. And I'll tell you how we can get decent roads in this country. Given that the NSA, FBI, Department of Homeland Security, CIA, once again did not prevent an act of terror in Chattanooga, let's turn them all into road crews. Give them buckets of macadam and shovels and put them to use some useful work for a change, huh? Because that's what Chattanooga is sending out there. For those who don't think it's a false flag attack, it's another reminder. All this NSA spying doesn't work. The FBI can't work. The CIA can't work. Department of Homeland Security didn't work. TSA didn't work. None of it worked. We all know what they're going to say. Oh, you need to give us more money and more authority, and then everything will be better. But it never is. Now, there is a video that we posted on whatreallyhappened.com. This is coming out of Michigan, and it's a personal statement by a gentleman who is saying he's fighting the foreclosure of his home, and he's willing to have a standoff with the sheriffs when they show up, and he says, yes, he expects that he's going to die, but better that than be a homeless person on the streets. And I'm putting this out here as a preface to an article that we ran on whatreallyhappened.com called the little case that threatened the entire banking system. And this is something I was unaware of until I saw this article. And if you're unaware of it, you should familiarize yourself with this. This happened back in 1968, where the bank was trying to foreclose on a guy named Daly, and Daly fought them in court. And he went into court saying the essence of any contract law is a trade of equal value under terms of the contractual agreement. The legal term is consideration. And Daly and his lawyer went before the jury and said, the bank did not actually give me anything of any value. They just wrote a number in a ledger book. They didn't have to work for it. They just wrote it. It's not a thing of any value whatsoever. And then they turn around and expect me to have to work to generate the equivalent value coming back. There was no real consideration. Therefore, the mortgage is null and void and they can't foreclose. And the bank's lawyer got up there and said, yeah, we just create the money out of thin air. That's our standard practice. It's what we do. And the jury found for Daly and said the mortgage is null and void. There was no actual thing of value transferred from the bank to the borrower. And therefore, the idea that the borrower had to work and slave to pay this all back was an unbalanced contract. And the jury took him like 5 minutes, came back and said, yeah, Daly gets to keep his home. And the judge in the case, the lawyers of the bank, demanded the judge reverse the decision, overturn the jury. And the judge said, no, there's no issue here. You, the bank, admitted. You just made up this number out of thin air to give to this guy in exchange for his mortgage pledge that he would work 30 years for whoever had these ink and paper tickets to hand out. Less than 6 months later, the judge was murdered by poisoning. Daly's lawyer was disbarred, and the bank came back and eventually had the decision, the Credit River case decision, nullified procedurally, meaning it wasn't reversed, it wasn't overturned, it was simply declared this doesn't really exist, cannot be cited in any future court cases. And then promptly it was forgotten, and nobody wants to talk about this because it hit the point right on the head. Banks do not loan you something out of their pocket. They just create it out of thin air. But you're not allowed to create it out of thin air to pay back to them. You have to work for years and years to match the number on the ledger plus the interest. It's a giant fraud. And that's why the court case is not talked about anymore. Just like after the founding of the Federal Reserve, public schools stopped talking about King George III's Currency Act as being the primary cause of the revolution, because Woodrow Wilson and Congress had sold us back into the exact same system of predatory banking slavement that we had fought the revolution to be free of. So you got to look at this case. It's the 1968 Credit River case. And it is a very interesting story. We'll be right back after the news. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And looking at the American corporate TV news media, it's all Chattanooga all the time, 24/7. Nothing else. And Obama's out there saying, we're going to get to the bottom of this. And Biden's out there saying, please keep the families of these poor killed Marines. And then they're going on about this Mohammed guy, and he's from Kuwait and all the rest of this stuff here. And again, this isn't news reporting. This is a sales campaign. This is propaganda. They have brought out the bovine excrement howitzer to deploy against the American people. Because I don't want you thinking about all those people over in Athens, Greece, who might actually decide to give their government the heave-ho. Don't want you thinking about how Israel is out there in Washington, D.C., trying to derail the P5+1 and start a war in which your sons and daughters will be killed and crippled. It's a very conveniently timed distraction. And, of course, the gun grabbers are out there and, he had guns. He did bad things with guns. Well, you know something? There isn't a technology on Earth that can't be used for both good and bad purposes. It's the people. It's the action that's the issue, not the tool. More people are killed with baseball bats than assault rifles. Do you want to ban baseball? It's just ridiculous out there. All right, we're going to grab ourselves a phone call. Andrew in New York, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Michael. I was reading on INFOWARS.com. There's a NATO drill, it's like the largest ever recorded, and it's in the fall. And supposedly they're gonna allow Russia to observe the drill because I think they're trying to make Russia think, oh, we're not harmful, we're not gonna do anything bad to you. So.
There could be another interpretation, and that is they're going to put on a real spectacular show to convince Russia that Russia shouldn't, try and even think about standing up to NATO. That would be the other explanation. You know, when Oppenheimer, when the Manhattan Project succeeded in building an atomic bomb, Oppenheimer actually suggested, rather than drop the bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, just invite a delegation from the Japanese government down to one of these abandoned Pacific islands, set off the atomic bomb there, where it wouldn't actually hurt anybody, and then let them decide if they wanted to surrender or not. Of course, the Japanese were already trying to surrender at that point. Truman dropped the bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki to prove the U.S. government was psychotic enough to actually do it. And, this NATO exercise is going to be a chance for the U.S. to come out and say, forget all about the bad catapults on the Gerald R. Ford and the F-22 asphyxiating its pilots and the F-35. We're going to show the latest and greatest, and we're going to scare you into accepting U.S. influence because there's no way the Russian military could stand up to the might of NATO.
About Iran, didn't Iran agree to this deal because, they were badly in need of money? They had, $100 billion, hold out, in Western banks, and, they were being sanctioned from selling oil. Even though this deal, would restrict themselves arming, their nuclear weapons or, conventional weapons, didn't they agree because they badly needed the money?
Okay, for some reason the phone line is cracking up a little bit coming from your direction. I don't know what it is with the American phone system. Basically, what Iran has agreed to is inspections to reassure the rest of the planet that they are not building nuclear weapons. Israel and the U.S. came in saying you've got to limit your conventional weapons, and even now Netanyahu's out there saying, well, they're going to take all the money they're going to get from their own, they're going to buy weapons and they're going to make war. And again, history's against him. Iran is not the problem. Israel and the U.S. are the problem. Israel has nuclear weapons. They've even tried to sell one to South Korea. There is reason to suspect that North Korea got their first nuclear weapon not because they built it, but because they just bought it.
One thing about the Tennessee shooting, what I say? I think the government stopped false flags 9/11 and the Boston Marathon bombing.
Yes.
Because these are big attacks and a lot of people it'll make people suspicious and has a lot of stories through the holes that can make them definitely look like false flags. I think now they turn to shooting
Well, I'm sure that, whoever's behind this false flag is out there saying, this time we'll get it right. There won't be any goofs. There won't be any loopholes. The shooter is dead. We don't have to worry about a trial or anything else coming out. There were no surveillance camera pictures around. It was all completely controlled. But it's already too late. We've had so many of these false flags that the American people's first assumption is going to be, this is just another one of the same, by a government that's trying to find some way to trick us into flinging our sons and daughters into somebody else's country to take control of their wealth. And we've really had enough of that nonsense. I'm not buying the official story on this, and I haven't seen anything to convince me that this is not another one in a long string of phony, made-up, false flag terror attacks to try and goad the American people into a war that nobody really wants.
Yeah, that's true. All right, thanks, Michael.
All right, you got it. Thank you very much for the phone call. Now, finishing up on the economy, there was a very telling article over on Investment Watch blog, and the headline reads, When Capitalism Turns to Cannibalism. And it's talking about something that I have been saying for quite a long time. As Wall Street became dependent on just making interest off of everybody else in the world, forced to use the U.S. dollar, they turned their back on manufacturing, and they allowed it to decay away. The experiment with GMO, which was an effort to try and make the world dependent on American GMO seeds to produce food, that has failed. Huge backlash against that. And as a result, without an economy that can actually produce anything for sale, it is turning into cannibalism. The 1% are now feeding on the 10%, and the 10% are feeding on the 50%, and that group is feeding on the other 50%. It's an economy that's tearing itself apart. Remember what I said earlier about the stock market. It doesn't matter what the indicator numbers are. We have lost more than half of the publicly traded companies since 1998. And it has become a predatory economy driven by a predatory central bank. And that's not a healthy economy. It may look really good to the 1% who are still rolling in the dough. But everybody else out here, we're in trouble. We're hurting. We're angry. And we are just as used, abused, and betrayed as the people of Greece right now. Now, here's a very, very telling article. This is from Business Insider. Approximately half of the McDonald's franchisees are very concerned that they're not going to be able to stay in business. And they're saying the operators are on a cliff, the sales are going the wrong direction. It's only going to take one decision to put any operator down and out. Well, McDonald's has already made the bad decision when they value engineered their food to the point of undigestibility. At the same time, they tried to rebrand as upscale to compete with Starbucks. Remember, McCafe? They wanted to uptrend a little bit and basically turned their back on their original market, which was very people on low incomes looking for a fast, cheap meal. I mean, when the Big Mac first came out, it was 25 cents. And their food lowered in quality, higher in cost, but what is McDonald's doing? Oh, it's all the fault of the McDonald's workers. They want too much money here. They actually want to be paid enough money where they could, well, like go have a meal at McDonald's. And that's a good example of an economy that's feeding on itself. Because every company that lowers the wages of their workers is lowering the wages for all their collective customers. Every company that offshores and lays their staff off is laying off somebody's customers. You cannot run an economy where the flow of wealth is from the bottom to the top and it stays there. Or it goes to some other country. Because it's not coming back in here because we don't have anything to sell. We really don't. All right, we got to take another break for commercials. When we come on back, a couple of notes about this Confederate flag nonsense. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And the corporate media is taking a brief break from the Chattanooga Festival, as it were, to report that the jury just found James Holmes, the Colorado shooter, guilty of first-degree murder. No surprise there. And as soon as they're done reading the verdict, I'm sure they're going to go right on back to Chattanooga and just pound you with that as hard as they can. So maybe time to switch over to movie channel or something for the rest of the day. Now, this nonsense over the Confederate flag is continuing. And it is absurd. I guess they're scraping at the bottom of the barrel for things to distract the American people with, because this is really ridiculous. Now, earlier in the week, we were talking about how the carving of the Confederate officers on Stone Mountain, Georgia, is under attack by the NAACP, which is seriously saying it should be sandblasted off. Just erase it. The way pharaohs would erase all the carvings of their predecessors to prove that they were the one true God of Egypt. It's all vanity, ego. Now there is, I hope this is a joke, okay, but they're talking about taking two of the four heads off of Mount Rushmore. George Washington and Thomas Jefferson, the two on the left, because they owned slaves. So Mount Rushmore will just be Teddy Roosevelt and Abraham Lincoln. Now, amazingly enough, the Blue Collar Comedy Festival actually anticipated this was going to happen. And one of the segments of their program, we've got the video linked to whatreallyhappened.com, where they came out with their own version of the Dukes of Hazzard, the PC version. It is hilarious. They replace the flag on the top of the General Lee with the rainbow flag, and they tell, Daisy May or Daisy Duke, whatever her name is, to cover up because otherwise it's sexual harassment and it really does show just how silly all of this has become. And everybody's hopping onto this whole situation. Now, Nick Brommel, a professor of American Studies at the University of Massachusetts at Amherst, is seriously out there saying there should be a law to classify displaying the Confederate flag as a hate crime. And anybody flying that flag would be arrested and thrown into prison. Have you noticed that the liberal idea of tolerance is you think like I do? I'm a tolerant person, you bigoted, racist, misogynist, chauvinist pig. That's their idea of tolerance, is that you tolerate them because that's empowerment, but they don't have to tolerate you because you're an oppressor. And we're heading on down that slippery slope. This whole idea of hate speech has been an attack on the First Amendment since its inception. Yes, you have freedom of speech as long as you don't offend somebody, as long as you don't make somebody feel threatened or that they're hated. And you can always find somebody who's going to whine about that. Remember the story we mentioned earlier in the week where these two feminists got together and organized a campaign to wreck the career and life of a software engineer who'd made a rather tasteless computer game. And then when he gets on Twitter to complain about it, and he didn't threaten them, these two feminists went to the police and said, oh, we have to charge him because, we fear for our safety because he didn't like the fact that we were trying to wreck his life and his career. It's amazing. It is absolutely amazing. Liberals are not tolerant. They're intolerant. It's their way or the highway. Your funding will be cut. You'll be arrested. You'll be thrown in jail. It's become a very rigid system of thought control. Now then, if you are somebody who's been following along the 9/11 story, you're probably aware of an environmental scientist by the name of Paul J. Loy, whose work focused on the health effects of the dust resulting from the collapse of the World Trade Towers and Building Number 7 in New York. And his work was very important because if you will recall, when 9/11 happened, the head of the Environmental Protection Agency went down there and told all those first responders, you don't need to worry about working in all this dust. Just clean up the mess, get rid of the evidence. You don't need to worry about the dust, knowing it was laced with particles of asbestos, which had been used as insulation in the construction of the World Trade Towers. It was one of the reasons it was looking at a mandated EPA retrofit. So there's no way the head of the EPA didn't know it was loaded with asbestos. And she told, yeah, it's fine, go on down there. And, of course, all those first responders suffered serious health problems since then. And in all the lawsuits involving recovery from that, the work of Paul Loy was cited. He appeared as an expert witness in some of these cases. Well, all of a sudden, he's died unexpectedly at the age of 68 at the Newark Liberty International Airport. Just fell down. According to his surviving wife, nobody knows why he died. There's no obvious reason for that. Remember the judge in that lawsuit I mentioned before, went on a fishing trip, got dead of poison. And a lot of people are very alarmed because all of a sudden there seem to be a large number of the doctors who are challenging the orthodox view on medicines, in particular vaccines. They're all of a sudden starting to get killed off. And when you're talking about the kind of money that these big pharmaceutical corporations are making, having somebody knocked off, that's just good business sense. Remember Karen Silkwood? The whole Kerr-McGee nuclear contamination scandal? All right, we're going to grab a quick phone call here. Mark in Texas. Aloha, what's on your mind?
Yeah, Mike, I'm just wondering how long they think that they're going to push Middle America around. I mean,
as long as they can get away with it.
Yeah, the states that they are always putting down and all that, these are the people that got the most veterans, know the most about firearms, and
I think that's why they're under attack. The Americans who aren't a threat to the status quo, they're going to be left alone. You look at all this campaign to try and bulk declare returned military veterans as mentally ill so that they are not allowed their Second Amendment rights.
Yeah, but they'll get their way. They'll get guns anyway. They'll get it somehow. And if they really push it too far, they're going to get something that they're not bargaining for. And and these leftists, like in places like New York and San Francisco and all that, they can't fight. They wouldn't know what to do. If something broke out, most of them very few of them have any military experience. Very few of them know how to do it.
No, they're just going to hire somebody else to do it for them, with our tax dollars. That's their strategy. I don't need to get my hands bloody. We've got all these people. We've got all these illegal immigrants. We'll just give them minimum wage and sick them on the American people. Mark, I'm sorry. I'm going to have to cut you off. We got to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And I just got an email that makes a very valid point here. The NSA can read your emails. They can read my emails. They can track your Twitter and Facebook social media accounts. They can track mine. But they never seem able to figure out where ISIS is tweeting or posting from. It just always seems to elude them. Maybe they need to look on Pamela Geller's laptop. By the way, I got a copy of the tweet by which somebody claiming to be ISIS is linking ISIS with Chattanooga, and I posted it to the front page of whatreallyhappened.com. The first thing that struck me, coming out of years of involvement in the motion picture industry, the graphic attached to it of the scowling ISIS fighter with the knife and the glint on the sharp edge of the blade, that's professional quality artwork. That's not some amateur out there just sketching a scary face to put on their tweets. That is bought and paid for top quality graphic art. That's a pro who got paid to do this. It looks like a movie poster. It's exactly what it is. It's another reason to look at all this as just a bunch of hokum. Alrighty, so Fox News has actually pulled away from Chattanooga. They're now going on about Scott Walker is out there running for President of the United States after putting the screws to his teachers and firefighters and police officer in his home state, not to mention, as we mentioned earlier in the show, anybody working on state construction projects. But he's expecting you all to forget that by the election. And apparently he was under investigation for campaign finance irregularities going back to when there was an effort to recall him. And apparently as soon as he announced for president, the Wisconsin Supreme Court said, well, we looked at it, there's nothing there, and threw the case out of court. How very convenient timing for that situation. So let's talk a little bit about Donald Trump. He's still out there. He is unapologetic for his comments about immigration and the problems it's causing, and he is getting a very powerful, positive response all across the country. He's now leading in the polls of GOP candidates in several states and in the last nationwide poll as well. And there's an article over News with Views saying right now Trump is the only person who's out there talking about the things that really matter to Americans. He's not out there hiding behind the manufactured issues that the candidates are doing. And that's why I think he is very, very popular. Because he's out there talking about things that are really going on, whether it's immigration. And by the way, he's against illegal immigration. And of course, the liberals are out there saying, oh my God, that's un-PC. How can you be against illegal immigration? You're against immigrants. No, we're not. Nobody's opposed to legal immigration. But illegal immigration is, by its very definition, a crime committed against the United States of America. Nobody should be in favor of illegal immigration. And it's not politically correct to say that, of course. You're being intolerant of these criminals coming across the border. Yeah, I am. Now, Trump has responded to this morning's false flag in Chattanooga by saying it is time to end this idea of a gun-free zone, at least on the military bases. Yeah. All of these mass shootings we have been seeing take place where guns are banned. It's a giant open-air, free-fire zone for whatever wacko government informant plant melted on antidepressants wants to go and have fun and not have somebody shoot back. That's what those signs say. When a gun-free zone, oh good, nobody's shooting back. These are all trained military people on these bases. Why do they want to ban them from carrying guns? Are they afraid of a mutiny from the rank and file? which may have happened back at Fort Hood, but they found a convenient Muslim to blame it on. But Trump is again right. Gun-free zones do not work. Gun-free zones are where the mass shooters are always going to go. And he's going to draw a bunch of fire from the gun grabbers and you can't be pro-gun. And by the way, I'm going to another plug here, and this is unsolicited. Nobody's paying me for this. There's a new show on the Outdoor Channel. It's called Guntucky, and it's about this family-owned gun store and gun range in Kentucky, and the hook of the show is they set up these fantasy shooting scenarios. And it's a lot of fun to watch for anybody who is a gun enthusiast like me. A lot of history, a lot of historical weapons, and it's a lot of fun. Now, over at the Hillary camp, she's got lots of money. She's getting all this money from Sheldon Adelson, from Chaim Saban, from all these people on Wall Street, and right now she is spending it to the tune of $230,000 per day, on the theory that the candidate with the most money will prevail. Maybe that was the prevailing wisdom in times past. It's not working now. Hillary's poll numbers, her popularity, are plunging despite this huge amount of money she has to spend. In fact, the sheer volume of money she's spending and where it came from is probably working against her. Because during this campaign season, your average American is actually paying attention to just where did all this money come from. Did it come from the American people? No, it didn't. When this nation was started, the reason there were limits on how much you could donate to a candidate's campaign was to make sure that the size of a candidate's campaign fund was a true measure of their popular support. But that all got taken away. Candidates are now available to sale for the highest bidder. They don't even really bother going out there getting donations from ordinary citizens. You guys don't have enough money to make it worth their while. They'll go through the motions and say you can send with PayPal and the rest of it, but it's just for show. They're getting their money in big chunks from people like Sheldon Adelson, Chaim Saban, J.P. Morgan, Goldman Sachs. All of these companies are pouring the money in there, and Americans are seeing that's where the money is coming from. And they understand that the politicians are going to do what the big donors want them to do. And Hillary is carrying more baggage than Kim Kardashian on a photo shoot right now, and it's coming back to haunt her. And her campaign is already falling back on the old canards. Oh, you're just opposed to Hillary because you don't want to see a woman in the White House. No, I don't want to see that woman in the White House. I would have been happy with Linda Lingle. You know, if McCain had picked Linda Lingle instead of Caribou Barbie, he probably would have won the election. He destroyed his own campaign with Sarah Palin. Absolutely absurd. I don't have a problem with a woman in the White House. I have a problem with certain corrupted individuals. Now, Michelle Obama apparently has spent $363,000 in taxpayers' money on a trip to see China's most popular landmarks. This came out of Judicial Watch. The numbers are from the United States Air Force. Now, supposedly, when you are the president, certain expenses are covered by the government, official business travel, state dinners, other things you're supposed to pay for yourself. If you're the president in the White House and you get a bologna sandwich from the kitchen while you're working, at your desk, you have to pay for that. That's not considered a state expense. And the same should be true of pleasure travel, but it isn't. I have another story coming out of here. The Federal Reserve has been using the NSA to spy on France for economic intelligence purposes. The NSA isn't looking for criminals and terrorists. They certainly missed the one in Chattanooga today. The NSA is spying on law-abiding citizens to steal their business secrets, and if they're doing it to the French, they're doing it to you. Got to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the last segment of our program today on this Thursday. And by the way, Rita Katz and Site Intelligence have just jumped into the Chattanooga false flag by proclaiming that they have found this Mohammed guy had posted all over these Islamist websites that he was going to do this and he was going to do that. Well, I mean, that makes it unanimous. You got Rita Katz and Pamela Geller and everybody hopping on board. Yeah, this is another propaganda hoax to try and get you all riled up and ready to just go after those gosh darn Muslims. How many times do you have to be lied to before you understand the United States government uses lies, frauds, and deception to start wars? Torpedoes in the Gulf of Tonkin, Spanish mine in Havana Harbor, the Lusitania, trust us, it wasn't carrying weapons. It was not a legitimate target of war, even when we sent it into that area where we knew the U-boats were without a military escort. Saddam's nuclear weapons, Assad's sarin gas. And on and on and on. Oh my goodness, Pearl Harbor was a complete surprise. No, it wasn't. Roosevelt spent all of 1941 goading the Japanese into the attack. This is just more of the same. This government won't hesitate to kill whoever they need to kill to get you to go to war. They need bloody shirts. Even among their own military. Well, that's what the military are for. Remember what Kissinger said? Military people are just dumb, stupid pawns to be used for foreign policy. Well, we'll just kill off these four, wave the shirts at the American people, they'll get angry. Just like Roosevelt did here in Pearl Harbor. He knew when the Japanese attacked, and Roosevelt knew they were coming, just didn't tell Admiral Kimmel and General Short. And he knew Americans were going to be killed. He needed the bloody shirts to anger the nation into war. This is just more of the same. All righty, now then, getting on back to the world of computers and spying, the United States is now directing the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration to basically put the lid on growing awareness of a program where the U.S. DEA is running their own spy operation, listening to phone calls, reading emails, all in violation of the Fourth Amendment, and they're providing this information to law enforcement to launch investigations of Americans. Now, the police agencies getting the information have to pretend they didn't get it. They have to go on out and try and find evidence on their own, because otherwise they get to court and say, well, this evidence is tainted. It's a violation of the Fourth Amendment. They're just looking for reasons to prosecute Americans, to criminalize us all so they can throw us in those prison factories and finally compete with those Chinese labor forces. Now, the other day we were talking about how China, along with Russia, is investing in their own internal large-scale integrated circuit chip facilities in order to manufacture computer chips which do not have the NSA backdoors. It is a huge loss of business for American chip makers and for those people working or who used to be working for those American chip companies. If you're looking for somebody to blame for why all of a sudden you're out of work, you can blame the United States government and the National Security Agency. India is now going the same direction. They're going to invest in their own domestic integrated circuit chip fabrication facilities because they don't trust anything coming out of the United States of America. In fact, there's more and more of these nations that have bought American weapons of war are now starting to wonder if there might not be back doors in them where the U.S. could pull the plug on the use of the weapon anytime they feel like doing. Sort of like what the U.S. did with France and the Mistral ships for Russia. Only after the ships are delivered, all of a sudden we don't like you anymore, throw a switch and whatever it is stops working. And the other day I was sort of ragging on the current state of American software development in view of this utter disaster that I had trying to get Drupal 7 to work. And it was working when I launched it. And over the course of the next 48 hours, it proceeded to eat itself from within. And I still haven't a clue what actually happened, which is why we're back on the original site. Everybody seems to love it. We're going to stay with that. Toyota has started a massive recall of Prius vehicles down in New Zealand. In fact, actually, the recall is in New Zealand, but the problem is worldwide. More than 600,000 Prius models have a software bug that can stop the engine at random without any warning whatsoever. I think we ought to go back to the good old days when you got a car that didn't have a computer in it, that had stuff in there that you could tinker with and adjust. I remember my very first car was a Volkswagen Beetle. It cost me $100. And it was easy to work on. I did have to do a valve replacement on it once. Broke a fan belt, went into the store, bought some women's pantyhose, tied it around the pulley and pulled it tight. That was it. The cars were built to just keep on running and to be easy to repair. Back when we had that piece of crud Nissan Xterra and it was starting to act funny, and I went under the hood, I found out there was nothing in there you could deal with. It all has to be done through the computer from a licensed and bonded and fully equipped mechanic who's charging $300 an hour. I started leaking oil out from underneath the valve covers. Figured, no problem, I can put a valve gasket in there. No, you can't. Because in the Xterra, the V6, the valve cover gaskets and the head gasket are all one piece. You can't replace the valve cover gaskets without replacing the entire engine head. That's nonsense. GM can't make a reliable ignition switch. What was that other recall we were talking about where the car doors just unlock without any notification, making carjacking easier, letting the little kids fall out of the back seat because all of a sudden the door can be opened. And now we have this thing with the Prius where the software will just randomly stop your engine. Bill Gates, before he retired from Microsoft, used to come on out and say, if the automotive industry had kept up with computers, our cars would be doing 250 miles to the gallon. And, of course, his critics said, yeah, and they'd stop every 5 minutes on the road, and the service manual would say, replace the entire engine. It looks like we're kind of there, isn't it? More news about record cold and snow coming from below the equator. And apparently it is over in Albury, Wodonga. They had their coldest day on record for the last 20 years. Cold snap breaks temperature records across New Zealand. And NOAA is out with yet another report trying to convince us that 2014 was the hottest year on record, forgetting all about the embarrassing 1936, the medieval and Roman warming periods. You know, those are all erased. They're erasing them like they're trying to erase the Confederate flag. You're not supposed to know about that. You're not supposed to know about King George's Currency Act. You will believe what we tell you to believe today. Now, the push for the carbon tax is in serious trouble because that big pile of snow in Boston from last winter only finished melting yesterday. But they've come up with a new idea. They want to put a tax on meat, because raising meat animals contributes to global warming because they produce methane, and now methane is being demonized. And basically, this is how government operates. They cook up a completely imaginary, non-existent threat, and then they sell you an equally imaginary solution to that imaginary threat in exchange for a tax increase and more authority over your life. NBC has come out saying that global warming contributes to the spread of Lyme disease. Won't talk about Lyme disease being a creation of U.S. biological warfare over on Plum Island. You don't need to know that part. Just, global warming is bad. It's all your fault. You will pay a carbon tax and a meat tax and a nitrogen tax. There's the music. Time for me to get on out of here, get something useful done with the rest of the day. We will be back tomorrow here on the Genesis Communication Network. Until then, stay safe, stay skeptical, stay informed, make good choices. Share what you know with everyone you know. We are all Greece now, if you look at our current economy. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.